Welcome to the Max Purchasing Control training session. I'm your Exact Americas trainer, Vince Stefanetti. In this session, we're going to show you how easy it is to start implementing Max Purchasing Control. Now, we're going to cover all the basics and as well get into more detail as we move along. Don't be worried if you know little or nothing about the module. We're going to start at the beginning and explain everything. It is important to know that you have a complete set of documentation in PDF format installed with your Mac system. You also have an online portal that contains a knowledge base and many other resources. You can gain access to the portal by navigating to https://customers.exact.com. If you do not yet have access to the portal, be sure to contact your customer advocate so that you can get a username and password. Now let's take a look at what we're going to learn today. We're going to learn about the purchasing flow of information and procedures. We're going to show you how to set up the purchasing control module. We're going to show you how to create and process non-inventory purchases. We're going to show you how to prepare for and process inventory purchases. We're going to show you how to use blanket orders, and we're going to show you how to process orders after you've run the MRP explosion. Okay, so let's look at the flow of information and procedures. The screens and reports offered in the Purchasing Control module enable you to issue and track purchase parts within your system, including constantly changing delivery schedules and quantity information. Now, the MRP explosion is run first. That creates planned orders for the purchase parts. Those orders can then be approved, requisitions can be released, POs can then be released, which are then printed and sent to the vendor, and when the goods arrive, they can be received to stock in the Inventory Control module. Now, after the MRP explosion has been run, planned orders are created. These are the orders that begin with a 4, with an order type of PL planned and a status code of 1, which means the order is at the planning stage. If the planner decides to purchase the part, he may approve it using approved planned orders in the MRP module, or approve it using the purchase schedule, which we will cover in detail later. Approved orders are status 2, which identifies the order as having moved from the status of planned to the status of approved. These are order series 4 purchase requisitions. Now, alternatively, a planned order may be directly assigned to a purchase order using the purchase schedule. In other words, you have the option to directly assign a planned order from the MRP module to a released PO. We'll show you that in the purchase schedule a little bit later. But moving along here, orders that are going to be purchased may then be printed as purchase requisitions. This gives authorization to the purchasing department to procure the required materials. These orders are 6 series orders with a type of PR and a status of 3 released. The purchase requisition signals the purchasing department to review the sources and requested materials. The purchase requisition signals the purchasing department to review the sources of requested materials. The purchase department may then get quotes from the vendors to come to a final decision on a purchase. Once that is done, purchasing assigns purchase requisitions or planned orders to new or existing purchase orders. Purchase orders in Max are 7 series orders with a type of PO and a status of 3 released. Next, they print the purchase orders and send these to the vendor. After the order has been made, the product is shipped from the vendor, and the receiving department receives the purchase order using Inventory Control module and optionally can print receiver documents. The receipt may be edited and marked for vouchering. The voucher can then be edited by accounting and posted. Now, that's a quick overview of the entire process. The next thing we're going to do here is show you how to set up the Inventory Control module so you can do all these actions. Okay, so let's take a look at new system setup. Now, Purchasing Control should be implemented prior to running your first MRP. Now, if you have outstanding purchase orders, you should try to get those entered into the system so MRP can see these as scheduled receipts for your first run. Now, once the system is fully implemented, the Purchasing Control module is fed information generated by the MRP module. This includes parts to be purchased, quantities needed, and required due dates. You can create and issue purchase requisition and purchase orders before your parts have been entered into the system by using non-inventory purchase requisitions and POs, which do not use part identifiers. Some basic information needs to be entered in the system before you issue your first purchase order and start using the module. We'll go through these items one at a time so you know what is required. They are setting configuration keys in the system manager, entering code data such as terms, ship via, currency codes, and tax codes, entering vendors, and entering buyer IDs. Okay, let's log into Max and navigate to the Purchasing Control module. Okay, let's log into Max. Just double-click the icon on your desktop. Then enter in your username and password. The default is manager all capitals and password all capitals. Then click login. And you'll be presented with the system manager. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at here is a couple configuration switches. So we need to navigate to activity in the system manager, system configuration. Now that brings up the configuration editor. Now for purchasing, we're concerned with a couple things here. The first one is under shipping address. Now you can enter in shipping address information here, and you can also enter in additional information here for city, country, state, and zip. But we give you 6 address lines if you have an extended address and additional information you want to put in under address. And those all print out on your purchase orders. Okay, so the thing we want to look at here, 2 key things: buyer verification and the AP account type. Now, buyer verification, this setting makes having the buyer ID required when entering purchase requisitions in POs. It also tells Max to print the buyer ID on the POs. So we have it set to yes because we want to actually implement that logic here. If you don't want that, then you can set that to no, and it won't print on the POs, and it won't be required when you add purchase requisitions and purchase orders. Now, the AP account type, this switch determines the default AP account type code to be assigned when you do a voucher. So you'll have to determine what your account type code is. We'll go over this a little bit in the costing session, which is in another training session, but the default is A. Okay, so that's what we want to do here in the configuration editor. Now let's look at some setup information in Purchasing Control. So click Materials and then click Purchasing Control. That'll open up the module. Okay, so let's look at the setup information for Purchasing Control specifically. So click on Activity and go to Purchasing Data. Now you'll see a number of items here. Now there's a few that we need to go over and set up so that we can actually add vendors. I'll click on Vendor Master here so we can take a look. Now you'll need terms, you'll need currency code, and you'll need a ship via and a tax code. So ship via is here and tax code here. Now we'll go over setting up those required fields before we do anything else. Okay, the first one we're going to configure is terms code. So select activity, purchasing data, PO code data, and go to terms. That gives you the terms dialog box. Now the terms code is a browsable field. It has the yellow highlight, so if you double click, you'll get the Codemaster browser. If you click the magnifying glass, it'll show you which terms codes you have in the system now. We'll double click one here. And let's look at these fields and what they mean. First of all, under terms code. So this is a 2-digit alphanumeric code that defines a user-designated set of discount and/or payment terms. Now, if you're using Dynamics, any 2-character codes are acceptable, but Dynamics supports only one set of terms codes for all its modules, so AR and AP use the same codes. The description field, this is a 20-character field describing the discount terms, for example, 2% net 10 days or 2% net 30, which we have here. The net days is a number up to 3 digits indicating the number of days before which finance charges will begin to accrue. For example, net 30 indicates that after 30 days finance charges will begin to accrue. Our next field here is discount percent. This is a number indicating what the discount percentage would be. This number can be up to 3 digits, including a decimal point. Now, if the discount percent is not equal to 0, then you have the option to either enter discount days or discount date. Discount days is the number of days beyond the voucher date during which a discount is offered. This is a 2-digit number. The discount date is the day of the month through which a discount is offered. This is a 2-digit number. You also have the user-defined key and reference fields to enter in additional data. Okay, next let's look at the ship via code. So click on Activity, Purchasing Data, PO Code Data, and go to Ship Via. If you double-click on the yellow highlight, you'll be able to browse. We'll go ahead and select one here. Now, the same thing as regards terms applies to ship via codes in relation to the integration with Great Plains Dynamics. So, 2-character code for both AP and AR. So you can enter in a code here and enter in your description. You also have the user-defined key and reference fields if you want to use those. All right. Okay, and our final one is the currency codes. Again, click on Activity, Purchasing Data, PO Code Data, and select Currency. Okay, now this option is primarily designed to establish currency codes and exchange rates for the multi-currency option. However, all users must enter a base currency code with an exchange rate of 1. You must enter at least one currency code before entering data in the vendor master. So we can browse on here. If you don't have multi-currency, you don't need to enter but one, but you would enter an exchange rate of 1, give it a symbol, and so on. If you do have multi-currency, then you would enter the codes and the exchange rates here. Okay, so we'll close that. Okay, now that we've added the code data, we can add a vendor. So click on Activity, Purchasing Data, Vendor Master. Okay, now Vendor ID is a browsable field. It's got the yellow highlight, so you can double-click that to look at existing vendors. But we're going to go ahead and add a new one. So we'll type in a name. And we'll select a terms code. Now under Type, we're going to select Normal. You can also select Subcontract if you have the Subcontract module. We'll select the status. Most will be active, but you can also select Suspended or Deleted. Under Currency Code, we'll enter our default currency code, which is US. And you can enter in the name and the contact information, the address, and the remit to. Now, under PO Printing, you can select to print the vendor part number, and you can also select to print the second part description. Alright, click More. You can enter in the FOB point, the ship via, which we entered in. You can enter in year-to-date total information. These will increment as well. You have a user-defined key and reference. Tax codes we'll go over shortly, and you have 2 email addresses and value-added tax information here. So we'll go ahead and click OK. We'll just enter in some information here. Okay, and we'll go ahead and click Add. Alright, so that's all there is to it on entering vendors. Okay, well that covers all the basic information that's required to enter a PO. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to look at adding non-inventory purchase orders. And you can do this before having parts in the system. You can use the Purchase Control module to enter non-inventory purchase requisitions and POs for non-inventory parts and other non-inventory items. Okay, so that's done by going to Activity and selecting Purchase Schedule. Okay, we'll maximize that. All right. Okay, to add a new non-inventory purchase requisition, first select the order type of non-inventory. Then go to PR Schedule from the menu, Add Requisition Line. That gives you this dialog box. So first you'll need to enter in the vendor. So we'll double click because it's browsable and make our selection. And let's go ahead and select Joe Vendor here. We'll put in a price, unit of measure, what the quantity is, and we'll enter in a description. Okay, we have our currency code default there, requisitioner. I'll just put myself in there and I'll go ahead and click Add. To add additional line items, just click New. Okay, let's close this and review some details. Okay, so here's our line. Okay, well, we created the purchase requisition. It's a 6 series order. It's released, which means it's status 3. Now you can go through and edit information here. You can change the vendor if you like. You can change the quantity. And you can change the date. As you can see here, it gave us a warning on save about the buyer. We'll fix that too. So we'll change this to the 25th, and we'll go ahead and select the buyer. Okay, now we'll select that line and we'll save it. Now you have some options here. You can use the primary sort by start date. You can select by order number or vendor, and you can use a due date range as well. If you go to options and you click preferences, you can configure the purchase schedule to show you different things and to behave a certain way. So you can auto-save the line items. You can save the schedule format, which means you can move the columns around and it'll save that for you. You can make the approved by a required field. We'll check that. You can default to taxable POs, and you can use the PO due date that's on the screen here instead of the other date. So we'll go ahead and click OK and save those things. And we'll have to enter in an approved by here. Okay, and we'll save that again. All right. Okay, well, let's look at the detail one more time on this line. I wanted to mention here that if you've gone through and set up GL account overrides, you can make a selection here if you want to categorize these purchases by GL account. If you double click here, you can make your selection, and we'll say here make this R&D, and we'll go ahead and update that. This is helpful if you want to categorize those non-inventory purchases, which most people want to do. Once you've added your requisition, you'll want to print it. So go to Report, Print Purchase Requisitions, and we'll select all and do a reprint here so you can see the report. Click Report. And there's our purchase requisition here. Okay. As well, if you want to print the schedule, you can do that here by just printing the schedule grid. Okay, once you've added your requisition and it's been approved and you've printed it and you've gone through that sequence, the next action is to actually get it on a PO. So we're going to show you how to do that here. There's a couple different ways of doing this. If you select the line or the row in the purchase schedule here for the purchase requisition, you'll see that you have some buttons that highlighted down at the bottom here. You can delete the line, you can assign it, or you can auto-assign. Now if you click Assign, what happens is it'll show you all the existing purchase orders out there for that vendor. If you click Assign, it'll convert the purchase requisition to a line on the PO. That's one way of doing it. If you auto-assign, it will automatically pick a purchase order and assign it to it. The other way to do it is by drag-drop. If we want to do that, we can go here and add a purchase order, and we can make that non-inventory. we'll select our vendor, select our buyer, and that purchase order has now been saved. Now we're going to throw that in the background here, and then I'm going to show you a really nice piece of functionality here. If you had several items on the grid, you could select those individual items. I just have one for right now, but if you hold down your left shift key and then you right click on the row, you can drag that item over, and you'll see it can't be dragged on this section, the header section of the PO, but if you bring it down here and you hover over the line items and then you release your right mouse button, it automatically assigns that item for you. Okay, and I'll show you that here. Alright, so that's how it's done. Okay, now if you don't want to go through the requisition process like we've done just now, you can automatically just go ahead and add a new PO. Click Activity, Purchase Order, click on PO, New, and select your type, either purchase order, non-inventory, or blanket. We'll do non-inventory because that's what we're doing now. Select a vendor, select a buyer, and then you can go into this screen and enter the information like this. And save your line item. Alright. So you're not restricted to using the purchase requisition process. If you want to add non-inventory POs on the fly or even purchase orders on the fly, you can go into these screens and add purchase orders or purchase requisition, whichever you like. Now that we've added our PO and we want to print, you have a couple options here. First, you can go to the icon here and click that. It'll automatically bring up your order number and set it up for you to print. So we'll go ahead and do that. We aren't going to use the default here, but we're going to use a laser quality crystal report. We're going to select PO port 1. We'll click Report, and there's our purchase order. Now let's look at a couple different ways you can review existing purchase orders. So we'll close this. Okay, and then we'll go to Inquiry, Purchase Schedule. Now in this dialog box you can review for inventory parts, non-inventory parts, and subcontract. You can display the PO due date. You can include notes and even status for items. You also have the ability to review by order, vendor, part, or blanket purchase order. So we'll go by order here. We'll select non-inventory to start with and click Query. As you can see, there's our purchase orders that we added. We can select by inventory parts and non-inventory, click Query, and it gives us all those, and so on. The other option that you have is to run the PO dispatch report. We'll click that here. We'll do all of it and run the report. And we'll exclude status 4 and status 5 items. However, we could include those if we wanted to. Okay, so here's our result. Under part ID, if it's non-inventory, it signals you with non-inventory part text here. If it's an inventory part, that'll provide the part identifier. But you'll have the order number, the balance due, the unit of measure, the current quantity, the PO due date, and the current promise date. Also includes the buyer and planner as well. Okay, now let's prepare the system for adding POs for inventory parts. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at here is under Activity, Purchasing Data, Purchase Part Data. Now this window is used to maintain purchasing information that is specific to a part ID. This information is required by the implementation sequence before the MRP explosion program can be generated. It's also a prerequisite to issuing inventory purchase requisitions and purchase orders. Before a part can be purchased, information from this screen must be accurate, along with vendor and vendor part data. Okay, let's select a part. We'll select our Ethernet cable here. Okay, so you can enter in your planning lead time, your buy lead time, and your stock lead time. You can assign the buyer ID here once you've updated the buyer ID table, which we'll be getting to shortly. And you'll want to assign a primary vendor. The reason why this is important is because when MRP runs and you begin to use the purchase schedule, it's very nice to have a vendor filled in that's your primary vendor instead of having to select vendors for each one of your parts in the grid. Okay, let's close that. Now our next item is vendor part data. Now, information regarding specific part vendor or part vendor manufacturer's part number relationships may be stored within the system in this dialog box. This allows the user to define an unlimited number of vendors for a part and an unlimited number of parts to a vendor, and likewise for manufacturer's part number. Parts and vendors must already exist in the system. Now, if you own manufacturer's part number control module, the manufacturer's parts must have been entered using Bill of Materials MPN tab. You have to mark and check those that the part is under MPN control. You can have an unlimited number of manufacturer's part numbers for a part vendor relationship. You are not allowed to change a manufacturer's part number or manufacturer on an existing vendor part relationship. You must add another record with the desired manufacturer's part number. When a purchase requisition is printed, a list of all approved vendors is printed on the PR for each part. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of important points on this screen. So there's 3 fields that are highlighted yellow. These are browsable. The first one is vendor. That gives you the vendor master browser. We can go ahead and select the one we have there. And then you have part number. Now if you double click this one, this is the part vendor browser. So for existing records, if you double click here, you'll be able to browse all existing part vendor relationships. Now this button right here is for the part master. If you click that, you can browse the part master. Now it's handy in this browser here to select part type and then put in B for your purchase parts and then search all those. That makes it a little easier. If you know the specific part, then of course enter it in there. But if you want to browse just purchase parts, you can search by part type code B and get all the purchase parts to come up. Now you can sort ascending or descending on the columns. So if you know the description or the part ID within that, part description 2 and so on, you can do it that way as well. So we'll select our part number here, the Sunset Red keyboard. Okay. Now in order to delete part vendor relationships, you cannot have open orders in the system for purchase requisitions or for POs. So you have to make sure that you delete all those open orders first, or it'll give you a warning telling you that there are open orders. The status field actually indicates whether this part vendor relationship is active or cannot be used, deleted. Now the system allows up to 3 price breaks per part vendor relationship. At least one entry in this section is required for the system to recommend purchase order prices based on quantity when the order is created. If you do not want recommendations from the system, this information can be omitted. Now a vendor may quote a price of say $10 per unit for the first 10 units, a price of $8 for units 11 through 25, and a price for $6 for any purchases of 26 or more units. So you might enter it in like this. You have to have at least one, and that's going to be $10. For 11, we'll put in $8. And for anything above that, which is 25, we'll put in $6. So the important thing to know here If you don't yet have the price break information, or you just want to use the cost per unit and make sure that it's recommended, you have to at least enter a 1 here, and then whatever that is. So in some cases, you may want to just take the material cost that you have in Part Master, enter in a 1 here, and enter your material cost here. All right. So we'll add that record in. Now let's look at some different functionality that we have here under purchase data. We're going to look at standard notes. Now standard notes can be put in by order, which means the note appears on every single order. You can do it by part, which means every time that part is ordered, that note will appear. You can do it by vendor. That means that the note will appear every time that vendor is on an order, or you can add it by specific part-vendor relationship. So let's take a look at the one for parts. Quite simply, you just enter in the part ID. We'll search by part type code, and we'll double-click the keyboard here. Now you can enter in the notes. Okay, so every time that part is ordered, we're going to see this. Alright, and we'll look at the next one here, which is for part vendor. So you would enter in the part ID, enter in your vendor, okay. And likewise, you can do them for the orders, or for vendor specific notes. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the purchase order form. So from activity, select purchase order, then select PO, new. Select purchase order. Now it's going to prompt you first of all to enter in a vendor. So we'll search our vendors and we'll select one. It prompts us for the buyer, so we'll select one of those. Okay, now you'll notice on the form, if you mouse over some of these fields, you'll get a magnifying glass. That means that these fields are browsable. For instance, you can browse on the order number and change that if you'd like. Over the ship to, that'll allow you to browse too. Now clicking on the More button, it allows you to add some additional PO information. The payment method, user-defined fields, and so on. Clicking the Order Notes button allows you to edit the purchase order notes or the part-specific notes. If you click Edit Notes, you can edit the whole text of that. Alright, now if you're on a specific line item here, we'll go ahead and add one real quick. And we'll save it. It's prompting us to create the part vendor record. We'll go ahead and do that. Now if you double right click, you can de-expedite this particular line item if you'd like. Now if you mouse over the vendor field over here and double click that, you'll get the vendor information dialog box. It'll give you the contact name and the phone number. If you click Vendor Master, this will allow you to access the vendor master record for that vendor, so you can update information on the fly here. Okay, if we mouse over the ship to and we double click that, we have a couple options here. You can select to drop to a customer, drop ship to a customer by checking this box. If you double click, you can browse the customer master, query that, and select the customer. And it'll display the address here. Clicking OK will throw that address onto the form. Okay. Now the other option that we have here, if we're not going to do a drop ship, we can add address codes. So earlier I added one here just as an example, and I called it 01, and I filled all this in here. But if you want to add multiple ship two addresses here, you can add these address codes. So you can code it however you want. The field is pretty lengthy, and so you can put something significant in there. You can put in the, say, the zip code or a particular city or what have you. We'll go ahead and enter a new one here. I'll just call it 02, but we can add this on the fly. You can see as soon as we add the code there, it activates the add button down here. Clicking add will add the record, and then clicking OK will actually throw it in on the form. Okay, let's add a line item. We'll enter in a quantity here. Put in a part number, pulls in the description and the current unit price for that unit, and just tabbing off of that prompts us to save. We'll say yes. Now, double clicking on the quantity field will give you the quantity discounts for a particular part. Now if we look here, you see quantity 1 and price 15 for our part 13,000. Now those were entered here back in part vendor, and this is vendor V300, and our part is 13,000. So we entered in a quantity of 1 for $15. So you can see that pulled in the quantity and the cost there. Okay. Okay, now let's take a look at the preferences for the purchase order dialog box here. If you select options here and click on preferences, you can see there's a number of different preferences that you can configure the purchase order screen with. You can generate line and deliveries automatically. You could have it number out the deliveries rather than the line items one at a time if you check that. You could have it autosave. You could have it create part vendor records. For non-inventory, you could have it require the GL reference and require receipt flag can be turned on. You can allow entry of the manufacturer's part number on the form, and you can set some warnings here. And for vendor info, you can allow editing. You could set the default to taxable POs, or you can plan the POs. We'll uncheck that for right now. We'll let MRP do some work. And you can also, on the requirement quantity, set the rounding. You're going to want to change this here, your logo. The way that you do that is you need to find the bitmap for your company, and just click the browser here, and you can select the one that you like. Let me see if I can find one out here to use, just to demonstrate and to change that. Okay, we'll use the exact bitmap here. Click open. It'll give you a little preview here, but then you click OK. Now you'll have to close the form and open it back up again. So go PO new purchase order. Okay, now we're almost back there. Alright, but you can see it brought in the new bitmap. Now while the purchase order dialog is active and open here, you have some other items that appear on the PO menu. You have the line item detail, you have delete item, multi-currency, currency, and tax information. So clicking line item detail brings up this dialog box and has all the specific information regarding this line item. Clicking on PO tax information gives you information on all the tax codes, and you can enter them in here, up to 3 of them. Okay. Okay, now let's look at some details regarding manufacturer's part control. So we're going to do a little example here and go through and look at the functionality of manufacturer's part control. So first we're going to go over to System Manager and go into the Bills of Materials module. Okay, I'm going to go to Part Master, and we're going to add a part here. We'll call it MPN 123, and this is going to be a purchase part. And we're going to click on Planner, and put it under MPN control. Okay, let's give it a primary stock ID. Okay, now we'll add it. Okay, now we'll go over to MPN, and it automatically puts it in there for us, and it's under MPN control. Now we can go through and enter a number of manufacturer's part control numbers here for each manufacturer. We can say A, and we'll just call this manufacturer AAA, and likewise a description here. And we'll go ahead and add that, and then we'll put in B, and we'll just put in a couple here for our example, and I'll go ahead and add that. Okay, let's go back over to purchasing, and we are going to add that part vendor relationship here to our vendor V300. So go to part vendor, put in V300, and our part is MPN 123. Okay, and we'll add that. Okay, and let's browse the manufacturer's part numbers that we entered over in Part Master. We'll double click the manufacturer's part number browser here and query that. And you can see here's our manufacturer's part number, the manufacturer, and the part ID. We'll select A, and we'll go ahead and add that. Okay, now we have that relationship, the vendor, our internal part number, and the manufacturer's part number. And we'll put in a price here, and update, and then we'll close that. Okay, so let's go back to preferences. Now if you remember, we had this entry right here, manufacturer's part number, allow entry on form. Now if the manufacturer's part number, allow entry on form in preferences is not marked, then the manufacturer's part number can only be entered in the purchase order detail dialog box. If allow MPN entry box is marked, then the manufacturer's part number dialog box opens when users type a MPN controlled part identifier on the PO form. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and leave that checked there and click OK. Now our part number here was MPN 123, and we'll tab off that, and you can see as soon as we did that, it's asking us here to select one. So if we double click that, and we happen to order this one now, B, we'll click OK, and we'll tab through that. We didn't have a price on it, so we'll enter one here and tab off that, and we'll go ahead and save the changes. Now it's telling us here, because we also have it set to create part vendor records on the fly, it's asking us if we want to create that, and we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so one other thing on this PO, we're going to go ahead and click Order Notes. Now we have a purchase order note already stored in the system. It's this one right here, these two rows. Now if we want to add a part note, we would check this radio button right here, and we can enter in a line number. Okay, now we had added a part note before for this particular part for 13,000, so it shows up here. And we can actually edit those notes here and put in more information if we want to. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to copy some information in here and click OK, and you can see it drops it all in there. Now you can have a price for the note. We'll put that in there. We're not going to add a GL reference, but in order for these to print on the PO, you got to make sure that you have these checked. So it takes the whole body of the different lines of the notes and we'll print them on the PO for you. Okay, we'll go ahead and save that. Look at our purchase order notes for the order, and we'll just add another note here. And we'll print that on the PO as well. Save that and click OK. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and print that out and see what it looks like. So I'll click on Reports, Print Purchase Orders, and I'm going to go ahead and select our number here. Okay, and I'm going to check Print Manufacturer's Part Number, Print Discount Detail, and we're not going to exclude duplicates. But I am going to select the laser-friendly form, and we'll go ahead and print that out. Okay, so there's our PO. Okay, it printed our PO notes, and it printed the line that we had selected there. Here's our manufacturer's part number information. Alright. Okay, well the next thing we're going to look at is a blanket purchase order. So click on Activity, select Purchase Order, click on PO, New, Blanket PO. Now you'll be prompted for the vendor as usual. We'll select one here, and we'll select the buyer. Alright, now a blanket PO allows you to enter a purchase order for a large quantity in order to benefit from quantity price breaks for a particular item without taking delivery on the total quantity until later. Incremental delivery quantities are entered and processed as the material is needed. When you choose New from the PO menu, you have a choice of the type of purchase order. Now you just saw that we selected blanket PO. For the first delivery on each new line item on the blanket purchase order, you're asked for the total order quantity for the line item. The quantity you enter will be shown as the default quantity for the line and delivery of the PO. So we'll enter in a quantity here for that line quantity. Okay, click OK. Alright, there's our blanket quantity right there. Now we're going to enter in the quantity for this particular delivery. And we'll put in our part number. Tab off that and save the line. Now, it automatically is prompting us for our second line. We'll cancel that for right now because we're going to work on the first one. Now we'll enter in our second delivery here. Now we had 20,000 in there. We have 1,000 on the first delivery. So now it's telling us the quantity remaining. So we're going to put in another 1,000 here. Tab off that. Save it. Now we could shut off that prompt, but we're going to add some more deliveries here. Okay, so now we're down to 18,000. We'll do another 1,000, and we'll go ahead and put it on a different date. Tab off that, save the line. Okay, let's do another one. Down to 17,000, another 1,000. I think you'll get the idea here. So put in one more date here. Alright, and we'll tab off that. Save that. Now, if you right click on the line, it's going to give you the total line quantity. So you can review it that way. Okay, now let's look at the detail. Double click that. Now this is very similar to a regular PO. However, you can see down at the bottom here it says blanket PO and it gives the total line quantity. Now you can edit the detail here and save it if you like, enter the purchase quantity and so on. But I just wanted to point out here that you're going to see the value of the line, or the quantity for the line actually, right here. And you'll also see the scheduled quantity, and we have 4 lines here, each for 1,000. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that. Alright, so that's it on the blanket PO. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how you can use the purchase schedule after running MRP. Click on the System Manager, go to Materials, MRP. Okay, so from batch we're going to do the MRP explosion process quickly here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close that. Back over to purchasing, and let's open the purchase schedule. Okay, so let's see what kind of results we got here. So we'll look at the planned orders only for inventory parts. So we'll click query. Okay, and we have a number of items here. So you can see if there's a primary vendor specified, it's going to show up here. So why don't we just go ahead and do it by vendor. We'll select one. Query that. Okay. Now this is what MRP is telling us we need from the upper level demand for these purchase components. Okay, so we can evaluate the situation here and see what we need, and then we can actually put these on POs. You can see the buttons down at the bottom here. They're not active yet, but we're going to activate some of those by doing our process. But we can assign, we can auto assign, and we can do the drag drop, and we can even undo the drag drop. So let's pick a line here. We'll just go ahead and pick our first one, and we're going to open a purchase order, do PO new, and we'll select our vendor. Okay, and automatically saved it. Okay, so if we wanted to say select these two lines here. Now, if we're going to go straight from the suggestions from MRP, from a planned order status 1 to the PO, we can just drag and drop that down. We could approve this and then go through and assign it a purchase requisition and go through the entire process as we described earlier in the information flow. But you can quickly take planned orders if you'd like and put them directly onto purchase orders. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and hold the left shift key down, hold the right mouse button down, and then we'll go ahead and drag this over and then drop it on the purchase order. Alright, and as you can see, now those two items are on the PO in just that one step. Alright, let's see if there's any approved in there. We'll check all orders, and we'll query that. Okay, there are not. Okay, if we go back to MRP then, and we go Activity Order Navigator, we can look at all the purchase parts. We'll go ahead and query that, and we're going to approve all of these. And you can see it went from a status 1 PL to a status 2 PR. Alright, that should be enough. So let's go back over to purchasing, and we'll look for approved, and we'll query that, and there's the ones that just got approved through MRP. Okay, so these are purchase requisitions status 2. Okay, let's open up another PO. Okay, we'll put that in the background, and we'll select this one line, hold down the left shift, right mouse button, drag it there. Okay, now you can see once we've done that, you have the undo drag drop. So if you've made a mistake, you can click this button and it'll remove that. And it moves it back from a PO to a PR. That would just be in this session. Okay. Now you can assign a PO, select a vendor, shows the open POs for that particular vendor. We can select our purchase order and sign that line. Okay, let's select another line, and we can do auto assign. Okay, we didn't put a vendor on that. Let's go ahead and put one in. Close that. And we'll need a buyer ID that's valid. Okay. We'll select the line and do auto assign. So it gives us the number of purchase requisitions assigned 1, purchase orders created 1, and here's the PO number. And we can go back here and review that PO. And there it is. Alright, so that's how you use the functionality in the purchase schedule to move the orders through the sequence, or go right from a planned order to a purchase order, or to make it a purchase requisition and then deliver it to a PO. In between that, has gone over earlier, you can actually go through and approve the purchase requisition and print the requisitions and go through the entire process or the sequence that's there, or you can go directly from MRP to purchase orders. Okay, well, that wraps up our session on purchasing control and manufacturer's part number. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've learned. So first we looked over the purchasing flow of information and procedures. That was the step-by-step that showed the order number type, and its sequence number: planned, approved, and released. Okay, then we went into how to set up the purchasing control module. That included all the code data, the ship via, terms, tax code, currency, and the like. We learned how to create and process non-inventory purchases. We learned how to prepare for and process inventory purchases and print purchase orders. And we also saw how to use blanket orders. Finally, we went over how to process orders after an MRP explosion using the purchase schedule. Okay, just a reminder that you have some additional resources. You have the documentation that's installed with Max, and you have your PDF documents that are available in the links in System Manager right under each module. You have the customer portal. If you don't have your username and password to get there, please contact your customer advocate, and they'll help you get a username and password so you can log in and review the knowledge base and a lot of other information. You have professional services, of course, and the whole team is exact here to help you with your implementation. Okay, well, thanks for attending this session, and we hope to see you in the next one.